Greetings, folks, on a Sunday afternoon from the old shoe shop here in Ustavola. I'm holding something that's not that easy to come by nowadays. This is a copy of the very first Dark Mountain book, and I dug it out because right at the start of the book, before we even got to the contents page, there's a poem by Rob Lewis. And I'm going to be talking to Rob this evening in the third of our overheard conversations, these Sunday sessions. So I thought I'd just read you the poem and tell you a bit about the journey that brought me and Rob into conversation today. I went looking for the wild one, the howler, the Vatic tramp, the one for whom the wounded hills are body burns, whose blood is stained with the old love wine of poet and earth. Warrior poet, slinging battle flag out at the static, shattering polite conversations everywhere. I looked in the anthologies, listening for echoes, traced for signs in the quarterlies, magazines, best-ofs. I learned it's been a good year for poetry. Grants and awards keep coming in. Contests and prizes are proliferating. The wise grey consensus counsels a return to the classics. Meanwhile, poor scientist holds extinction in a palm full of numbers, with nothing but data to howl with. I carried that poem from the beginnings of Dark Mountain into all sorts of places, read it at all kinds of events. And when I wrote At Work in the Ruins, I wanted to quote it. And my publisher said, well, you have to get in touch with Rob and check that we have his permission. So I did that. And he wrote back and he said, it's funny, those last lines about the scientist with only data to howl with, because he'd been on a journey which in many ways parallels the journey that At Work in the Ruins took me on, a journey of questioning the ways in which we frame the trouble that we're in when it comes to climate change. Not in any sense questioning the seriousness, the depth of that trouble, but questioning whether the way in which it is being described is likely to make the trouble worse rather than help us find paths that make sense starting from here. But what Rob had been doing was he had got into dialogue with a whole bunch of climate scientists who'd been working for decades with the side of climate change that goes missing from a lot of the public discussion, which is that the climate isn't just about the mixture of gases in the atmosphere, which then has an effect on the living systems and ecosystems and lifeways of the Earth. Those living systems are part of the climate. They co-create it. Forests and trees and land masses and rivers and oceans are all part of how climate arises and happens. But those parts of it are less easy to model with computers, and therefore the part of it that's to do with CO2 came to dominate the mainstream presentation and discussion of the climate science. And Rob has been bringing his gifts as a writer and as a poet to tell the story of the scientists who've been working on this less known side of understanding, making sense of the trouble that we're in. And in particular, what emerges from this about the ways in which some of the dominant responses to climate change are likely to be counterproductive, to make things worse. So I've invited him to join me this evening as he's about to travel to Munich to take part in a scientific conference around all of this. And in our conversation, we're going to try and draw out the story that he's been following.